So hi and welcome to another episode of TechTalk.Travel. Today's guests have flown all the way in from Las Vegas. Mark Fancourt and Shane Cole, the founders of TRAVHOTECH and Vegas Testbeds. Testbed Vegas, I apologise. Gents, it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thank you. Good to see you.
I know you've been touring. I had a tour through Europe, and that you've graced us with your presence here in Cologne. So it's wonderful to have you here.
Thank you. Where else would we want to be?
Well, you know, there could be some. So, gents, before we kind of get into the meat of a conversation, why don't you start with giving us your backgrounds? I know, obviously, Mark, you and I have known each other for a long time, but for the audience, why don't you just give us a brief summary of your transition into hospitality, your history, and where you've come from? Shane, let's start with you.
Well, my background's from loyalty. So I worked with Collinson Group for back sort of 10, 15 years ago in their loyalty programs, and got to the US through that. And then an opportunity came up to move to Las Vegas to work with an airline, low-cost carrier called Allegiant Air, and they were going through a tremendous amount of growth at the time. So working on their the web presence for all their bookings are direct, through to all their self-management tools for check-in and change your flights, or then back-end sort of airline operational systems. So got to lead teams building stuff that normally most airlines go and buy from Sabre or Amadeus, and that seems to be also very similar to hospitality, where there's two big players that kind of dominate, and then doing other things, kind of then have to then force their way into integrating those things. So my background in that space was, hey, we get to build things you don't normally get to build. And then 2016, the first Marriott Accelerator here in Europe was held, and I was at an establishment consuming a few beverages and pitched an idea, and then we won the first year of the competition. And rather silly was that because I'd stayed at a hotel, I thought I knew what hotel technology should be, and so it was a guest experience type system chatbot, right? So rather than what are the real problems. So I met Mark at High Tech, and then we started talking, and as you get into it, it's like, well, actually really, you only really see these problems when you're behind the curtain, when you actually see the true problems that need to be solved. So that's sort of, I guess, 3 years now, I started that journey into on the hospitality side. Similarly, coming from the airline space, you don't know until you start working in it where the real problems that can enable things come from, right? So that's my
awesome. And you're Australian as well.
I am.
How does an Australian? So Daniel's stuck with 3 Aussies in Cologne. That's a worry.
That's a little bit weird.
Just give us a brief on how you ended up in Vegas. Like, why Vegas?
So I was I left. I was in Thailand, and
as many Aussies are.
And GFC, the Lehman Brothers fell over in September 2008. And I was on my way back to London to find a job. And I thought, what the hell am I doing? Because it's like the world was falling apart. And met up with Collinson Group, and they decided to invest in tech rather than shedding jobs. And they said to me, I turned up at the job and they said, hey, can you go to the US? And on the way over to the US, I met a lady that weekend. Okay. And then 3 months later, we got married. So wow. So I got my first experience in a Northern Hemisphere winter was flying into Minneapolis in January, and it was minus 24.
Wow.
And I had an American Apparel hoodie. So, that was all these experiences kind of compounded at the same time, which was meeting someone, jumping into a new industry, and experiencing cold like nothing else.
Yeah, well, I can understand the cold part is unpleasant, but okay, Mark.
Oh, well, hotelier all the way through, and started off with operation, went to hotel school in Brisbane when Brisbane was hosting Expo 88.
Oh wow, I remember that.
And it was. But I was saying to someone the other day,
together we'll show the world was the tagline.
I mean, Expo actually was something that people noticed, whereas now it sort of disappears into the ether. But anyway, and this is the other thing that happened for Australia at the time was the Japanese had discovered Australia, and as a result, Queensland, my home state, being sort of the sunshine state as it's known, holiday destination, the Gold Coast, that type of thing, were building lots and lots and lots of 5-star hotels with a lot of Japanese investment coming in to sort of get the 5-star hospitality industry off the ground in Australia. So the Queensland government set up a purpose-built hotel school and brought in a very high calibre of European lecturers, and I went to hotel school, passed out in the year of Expo 88 and went and worked in Expo 88 right through it, and then got into my first property, which was a brand new resort that Hyatt built on a place called the Sunshine Coast. So worked in operations predominantly through rooms, and I ended up becoming exposed to Fidelio in 1989 with Beaufort Hotels, which it was building in Brisbane at the time, a 6-star hotel experience. Butler service on every floor, 5 interfaces, which of course these days is a bit of a joke, but back then it was a big deal. Anyway, we'd put Fidelio in, so I got in very early on the beginning of Fidelio as a product, and naturally ended up getting headhunted around to operate hotels that were using it, and then naturally I ended up at Fidelio. So
uncommon story.
Yeah, and I worked through that. That was a heady times, exciting stuff. We couldn't keep it on the shelf. Yeah. And people would ring up and say, "Hey, can we have your system? Have you seen it?" Said, no. But someone told us it was good, and we never. Okay. Yeah. Anyway, so I ran the PMS product for Australasia, and anyway, around about that time, Fidelio had purchased Executive Technologies in Naples in Florida, and the main reason for that was to move off a Clipper database and onto Oracle. And Executive Technologies had a CRS. Well, in actual fact, very interestingly, at the time, they had a combined CRS and PMS platform, single, all-in-one solution that was already in market. And Fidelio wanted Oracle because they wanted a proper RDBMS. Anyway, we formed a small team to launch the initial product, which was a CRS and a CIS product, or customer information product, for hospitality companies, which of course no one could have such a thing up until that point. And off we went with the product. And so we had a global team, we got it off the ground and had some false starts, along the way, but eventually the product took off and ended up in pretty much most regions in the world, being in all of the middle tier hotel groups, names like Kempinski's, Peninsula Group, Shangri-La, Four Seasons, and so forth. So I ended up running that division for Micros for Asia Pacific, and then also took on the revenue management product when Micros bought Olympus 2 and introduced that to Asia as well. And anyway, I finished up with them in 2003 and did a startup for an ERP product for hospitality, which was a challenging year, and moved on from that. And anyway, I ended up joining Pan Pacific Hotels and Resorts at that time, who had been a customer of mine through the enterprise systems at Micros Fidelio. And I became the technology head and pretty much developed their technology strategy from the ground up, deployed it and standardized that across the group, and then we merged to form PPHG, or Pan Pacific Hotels Group, with United Overseas Land in Singapore, and continued that program on and brought the two brands together. And then I got the opportunity to join MGM in Las Vegas, which is what took me to Las Vegas. And the company had launched a hotel company. And what was most interesting about that is we'd taken on another, well, it wasn't so much a new product at that time, but certainly a new concept, and still a new concept for industry today, which was an ERP for the whole technology environment. So instead of 15 line of business systems, we had one. And sort of having given my background and had been in front of a lot of new technology throughout my career, both as a vendor and as an operator, that was a really exciting prospect for me. So I got to experience and deploy, what allowed hotels to run in a truly single operating environment, which very, very challenging because it's such a big shift for our industry for people to even think that way. And so I worked very hard at that, really enjoyed the challenge of it. And then I went and I joined Senior and as the Chief Operating Officer and sort of brought my industry experience into the company to try and take the company to the next level. And was with them for just short of 3 years. And then Shane and I got back together and kicked off our personal ventures. So, 30 plus years, hospitality, technology, both sides. And it's been a fantastic journey. It's taken me all over the world and allowed me to meet fantastic people. And here I am sitting with an old mate from Australia in Cologne.
So given what you just explained and said and all that huge experience over all these years, we see a lot of changes currently, especially with the topic marketplaces as well, in PMS environments as well. So what's your take on the current situation from what you explained before, like interfaces, okay, we had 5, but the connection was not possible. And now we are all talking about these open APIs, new environments, everything out of one solution, ideally plug and play in theory. So what's your take on that currently?
Well, look, the thing that I learned, particularly going through the experience I went through with MGM and then with Senium, is that my very firm view is that if we can't get the technology more connected and integrated in the industry, we're going to continue to struggle. And I actually believe that it will ultimately become an imperative for financial success to move into an environment where, the problems that we have in industry, moving technology aside, is we can't grow job roles because we're expecting our staff to master a swathe of technology. So how can your average receptionist has to know the PMS, probably a service management platform, voice and so on and so forth. The only way that we can truly turn hospitality jobs into interesting jobs, consolidate roles, is by consolidating technology. So the world that we've all lived in my entire career, quite frankly, as well, requires this division of basically departmentally oriented technology solutions, and that can't last. That has to change. And I think it has to change for more than technology reasons. It has to change for commercial reasons. I think it's going to be very, very difficult for hotel operators to maintain profitability without consolidating technology and changing the way they operate hotels. And I say that because I experienced it myself with a platform that actually allowed that to happen. The industry under that environment looks really, really exciting because you can change everything. You change the whole way you run hotels. So I think it's absolutely imperative, Daniel.
And do you see certain technologies out there? Like, for example, we spoke with Ben from Impala, we spoke to the guys from Apaleo. Do you see certain technologies as well in the US that are going into that direction, that have that idea in mind and the right concept?
Or similar type of companies?
Yeah.
I think for me, the change that's happened is more around technology platforms. But in truth, we still have sort of that vendors do this and vendors do this and vendors do this and vendors do this. What's changed is in essence, service bus technology that's made it easier for connectivity between vendors. And of course, the other thing that's changed that is at least those vendors who've been able to move into true cloud environments because they only have a single version of the product.
Right.
But at the same time, we're still talking about connecting all these different systems that are still different systems. Things are slowly coming more and more together, and I think that's largely a byproduct of the fact that we just have more technology in industry now. So, if you think about when we started, a lot of hotels didn't necessarily even have a procurement system. Now, at a minimum, there'll be a property management system, probably a sales and catering system, a finance platform, a procurement platform, point of sale as a minimum. These are core, and I would like to think, at this stage, a service management platform as well. So there's 6 core, what I would call core systems, right? Yeah, of course, on top. But and that's what's driven the necessity for, you know, increased connectivity. It was interesting for me because when I went to Las Vegas, you know, MGM and all the gaming companies for that matter have great experience with service bus technology and have had for a very long time because they can afford to, number one, but two, they saw the imperative of, you know, an across business experience because they have accommodation, they have food and beverage, they have lifestyle and entertainment, they have spa business, and they have ticketing business as well. And they did it, certainly at MGM, they invested significant resources, financial and human, to be able to connect what they call the single pane of glass, which gives the operational staff the ability to see that from the customer's perspective and take them through that booking process. Most resorts, you know, in our industry today, still couldn't do that across all their various product sets. So it's an imperative, and this has to happen.
So I'm not going to go into the you know, 'cause my hospitality background is not deep, but just looking in general at technologies that get to a point where they've got a marketplace. So that could be a great thing. If you look at Atlassian, did very well by having a marketplace to go and find things and install, and you could expand the use of Jira and Confluence. WordPress has all these great add-ons you can add into it. We know the App Store, whether you got, you know, Google Play or App Store from Apple, that opened a lot of stuff up. But then it also, when you've got tens of thousands of things in that marketplace that you can try, the things it creates confusion on which thing am I going to use, which thing's actually going to be right for my role. And then you've got, so those sort of marketplaces are quite broad in those examples that I've given. But in the context of a hotel, let's say, well, their job is to service guests, right, and run and operate a building, a property. So while I think you can get away from standards that take a long time to define, which is I think some of the questions about HTG, right? Sometimes it takes a while to get there. Maybe there's some principles around what does this look like? What's the vision like, right? You know, because hospitality, the building's there for 50 years. The speakers are there for 30 years. There's a longevity. So maybe there's some principles rather than set standards that should be sort of taken into it, because knowing that at the end of the day, hospitality is about people. Maybe there's some stuff there about, like I said, longevity, because you want to get it in and have it long lasting, because retraining people takes time away from doing their actual, you know, purpose. Being in front of a terminal too much, you know, that's not their role. Maybe, you know, there's questions on automation. Right, if it's going to take people's jobs away, well, maybe it actually frees them up to actually create better guest experiences, because or more complicated guest experiences that get solved. So that's the sort of stuff I start looking when we start diving into this sort of discussion. Is like, well, you know, yeah, everything's open and connected, great, but like you're just going to confuse people who potentially trying to make decisions on stuff that really, where does it come back to? And their main job is not a technology buyer or a technology selector. Theirs is I need to service, I need to operate, I need to...
Yeah, it has to make sense.
Has to make sense. But yeah, I said, like, when you get into marketplace, to me, that's just going like, you know, remember back in the day, you get the magazine with the floppy disk on the front with thousands of things to try. And then we've just expanded on that over the years. So now there's 10,000 different things in a marketplace, like an app store. Which one do I really need to operate my business? And when are we doing things in like this? Like, how many things are you then getting into where it's like, oh, I need that functionality. You grab it, you use it, you get used to it. And then all of a sudden, the next bit of functionality, there's the whole SaaS model, right? To get that one bit extra, you got to buy all these extra things. So where does that truly leave a hotelier making a decision on a piece of technology if the marketplace approach is something that's entirely geared towards just trying to incrementally kill you with purchases? All of a sudden you're spending thousands where you used to spend hundreds.
Yeah, I don't know that, I see what you're saying, I understand that, but I'm not sure that that's the intent of the marketplaces that are in place now.
Yeah.
So for example, you know, Appalachia's marketplace snapshots, that's not how they're basing their business model. What they're trying to do is clearly, I think, present options to a hotelier that these are available for them, given that they need to have a certain base, if you like, that they can plug those options in. And really, I think what we need to do in our industry is we still have a major hurdle in getting the hotelier to understand that that's a possibility, and that legacy solutions are really no longer sustainable for their longevity. Like you said, a building lasts for 50 years. Don't put a legacy solution today into a new build, because that is just absurdity. And I think we're moving towards platforms that offer the ability for a greater evolution of technology. As technology evolves, the platforms that we are putting in place today, I think will last longer than traditional legacy solutions.
Yeah, well, I think, you know, I mean, the real benefit of it is the speed to iterate, right? You know, the ability of not having to do, version management from customer's perspective at least, is that the technology can move along faster, and you can get capability to market that wasn't there yesterday with, you know, minimal interruption to customer operations, and that's fantastic. You know, you can't underestimate the value of that. Certainly coming from a person who's spent, you know, both sides of the industry helping customers, you know, keep moving with their technology, or moving my own companies along with technology. You simply can't underestimate the change that has brought to industry.
So from what I see from our events as well that we do all around Europe, and the talks we do, and the discussions and what have you, to cover the marketplace topic, is that it really helps the individual hotels, because we all did these RFPs in the past, and it took weeks and whatever for hotel groups to put all that information together, and interfaces and here and there, and they have all these different questions. And but from an individual point of view, from an individual hotel, small groups, whatever, will they ever do a real RFP? No, they will start running around asking questions. Do you have this interface? But I have that and whatever. And I think that's where a core value of the marketplace hits. Because you can just go there and see directly, like, who's integrated.
Well, and also you have such a turnover with staff in a hotel.
As well.
They go to the next place and say, hey, I've been using this.
Exactly.
And it's great. So they start to bring the technology with them.
Exactly, and you can, within a snapshot, you can like see, okay, is it connected or not? And we all remember those times when there was no Support de Hotelero in Spain, or Hotel Tech Report, or Toolie Tips, or whatever, where people can just go to and see, okay, that's the interfaces that existed with that company. It was manual hard work, calling people, and whatever, right? So I think that there's a big value in that context of marketplace.
Started thinking, trying to